First session of this meeting room one is taking place. Here in this session, Macroeconomy 1, the chair of the session is Dr. Monjur Hossain, Research Director, Bangladesh Institute of Development Studies, BIDS, and Dr. Muhammad bin Islam, Associate Professor, Department of Economics, University of Dhaka, as a discussant. Now, I would like to hand over this session to our chair, Dr. Munzul Hossain. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. I welcome you all to this session, first session, Macroeconomy 1. I'm Munzul Hossain, I will chair this session. As I already told you that every presenter will get 10 minutes each, and then after all presentations, the designated discussion will discuss the papers. We'll give you some comments on your papers. You'll get around 10-15 minutes, then we'll take some comments from the floor, and finally the presenters will get some few minutes to respond, and finally we'll conclude. So first of all, I would like to invite Mr. MD Tuhin Ahmed to present their paper, Macroeconomic Effects of Energy Price Fluctuations, Evidence from Bangladesh. This paper is co-authored by Dr. Salim Ibrahim, Professor of Department of Economics. You will get 10 minutes.
Thank you, sir, and thank you all. So this is good morning. Thank you, sir, and thank you all. So this is Tuhin Ahmed, a lecturer of economics, Maulana Bhashani Science and Technology University. Now I'm going to present our recent work on the impact of energy price fluctuation on the macroeconomy of Bangladesh, and this research Dhaka, and other two co-authors are Abdul Jabbar Shakil and Takrim Fedushuri, both are research associate at SANEM. So, energy price fluctuation is one of the key component of global economic system, and it is considered one of the most important factors in national and international economic progress. The price of energy directs affects our industrial output, investment, international commerce, etc. The high energy price basically influences consumer products, services, and it creates future uncertainty. It has also a detrimental impact on economic performance as it diverts spending away from the capital goods. Also, the fluctuation in the price of energy have a significant macroeconomic impact both on exporting and importing countries. It also affects our transportation, production cost, and heating bills, which is an uncertainty in the world economy. Bangladesh as an energy importing country, its economy is directly affected by international energy prices due to its heavy dependence on imported fossil fuel energy like crude oil price, coal, natural gas, and LNG prices. Rising energy price also worsens the balance of trade, terms of trade, and capacity to pay from export earnings. So against this backdrop, our paper actually tried to investigate the impact of energy price fluctuations on the key macroeconomic indicators of Bangladesh like GDP, CPI, exchange rate, and interest rate. So our paper actually contributes to the body of literature in three ways. First, we have seen that majority of the literature tends to concentrate on the influence of crude oil price shocks on the macroeconomy. But our paper actually examines the individual impact of four crucial energy prices, crude oil, natural gas, coal, and LNG on Bangladesh economy. Secondly, our paper investigates to what extent the effect of energy price are asymmetrical, that is, which energy price shocks have a more detrimental impact. Third, it conducts this analysis using quarterly data. So this is the very first time that we have used quarterly data in such analysis in the context of Bangladesh. So we have also reviewed several literature on the field of energy price fluctuations on macroeconomy. We have found that most of the literature that I said earlier focuses on the crude oil price impacts on the macroeconomy. For example, Islam 1981 import price index, and the study found that a rising oil price worsens the balance of trade, terms of trade, and capacity to pay from export earnings. Hesari and Oshino 2015 used the structural VAR model, and they have found that the effects of shocks in the oil price on developed economics GDP growth is milder compared to emerging economics. Amin 2015 also used DHG and real business cycle theory. This study found that while energy price shocks accounts for 3.29% of output fluctuation, productivity shocks plays a more substantial role in the economy. Ahmed et al. 2018 used SVAR model, and the study found that a short-term adverse impact of oil price shocks on Bangladesh GDP. Punji 2019 used DAG dynamic stochastic and equilibrium model and panel VAR model, and the study found that an increase in oil price uncertainty regarding the crude oil price have opposite effects on macroeconomic indicators in the short term. Hossain et al. Used a macroeconomic policy simulation model, and
This is our paper.
actually, sir, and this paper used domestic energy price revision on the macroeconomy in Bangladesh, and the study found that an upward revision of energy prices in Bangladesh will be slightly inflationary, and as a result, the real GDP growth rate will fall slightly during the predicted time period. And Ahmed et al. 2022 used VAR, impulses of functions, and various decomposition. And this study found that the adverse impact on macroeconomic variables like GDP and inflations. So this is the overview of the energy consumption, where we have seen that the share of our energy in the power generation. Gas is the dominant source of our power generation. While over the years the gas has been the share of gas has been decreasing, while the share of coal, liquid fuel has been increasing. And the right upper top figure shows the natural gas consumption of public sector power plants, and we have seen that the share of natural gas consumption has been increasing over the years. But since 2018-19, there has been a declining trend. On the other hand, the coal consumption by the public sector power plant has been increasing over the years. We have seen that the furnace oil consumption has been increasing, though there was a sharp decline during the COVID-19 period, and the LNG import also increasing over the last few years. So this is the theoretical framework of our paper. Actually, here we use the basic aggregate demand and aggregate supply model. On the supply side of the economy, when energy price rises, supply will fall. That supply curve shift, aggregate supply curve shift left. On the demand side of the economy, when energy price increases, consumers drop their consumption. So due to drop in consumption, the aggregate supply will fall. So aggregate demand curve will shift leftward. And the supply side of our economy is more affected by the demand side of the economy, and it results in higher prices and lower output level at the final equilibrium. So this is the data and methodology of our research, where we use 4 energy price variables, and we also use macro variables like money supply, exchange rate, interest rate, log of CPI, log of GDP, and all of the variables are used. We use the quarterly data from 1990 to 2022. Majority of the variables we have got from the IMF price system, primary commodity price system, and the GDP data we got from the BBS. Here is the time series plot of the data. during the financial crisis of the 28, we have seen that the energy price experienced a notable surge, which later declined before the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, energy prices once again witnessed a significant increase. We have seen that over the years, our money supply, GDP, or CPI has been a consistent rise. The exchange rate over the years depreciated, and the lending interest rate has followed a decreasing trend since 2012. So this is our data, and we are using the time series data. So here we actually to avoid the spurious outcomes, we used unit to test, and we applied ADF and Phillips Perron test to check whether our time series is stationary or not. And we employed the structural vector autoregressive model as our analytical tool for this investigation. The structural VAR model allows for both contemporaneous and lag interaction among the variables in the VAR system. That's we have used it. I'm not going to one by one interpretation of the data and methodology, but from the simplification of the SVAR model, we have seen that equation 5, which actually shows the coefficient A, which is the contemporaneous coefficients, and actually here we used 6 endogenous variables, and in this model we have 22 unknown parameters and maximum 21 parameters we can identify. So this is the matrix A, which is actually shows the contemporaneous coefficient. For example, the long money supply is an exogenous shock in our model, and exchange rate response to money supply, interest rate response to money supply, and exchange rate in this way. So our interest variable is coefficient 13 and 14. The 13 shows the impact of energy price on CPI, and C14 shows the impact of energy price on GDP. So we have 4 energy prices, and that's why we run 4 different energy SVAR models. And in first, second, and third, and fourth model, we use crude oil, natural gas, coal, and LNG price respectively. And our macro variables are the same in each of the equations. We have used impulse response function to investigate. Sir, can we have 2 more minutes to conclude? Yeah. So we have used impulse response function to investigate the dynamic effects of the energy price shocks on the macroeconomy in Bangladesh, and we also use the variance decomposition to understand how much variation of the macro variable can be explained by the variation in the shocks to the energy price. So this is the descriptive statistics, and you need to test our variables.
You can avoid this part.
Okay. So this is the result of the contemporaneous effects, where we have found that the crude oil, coal, and LNG price shocks have a contemporaneous significant positive impact on CPI. That means an increase in energy price like crude oil, coal, and LNG has a significant positive impact on CPI. That is, an increasing energy price leads to CPI inflation in Bangladesh. And crude oil price has a positive contemporaneous impact on GDP. This might be because of the time lags in passing increased cost to consumers and business. The country and businesses use of fixed price contract, government subsidy shielding from the immediate impacts, and the government's allocate expenditure on infrastructure and development projects, contributing to our short-term economic growth and masking the negative impact on GDP. And this is the result of impulse response functions. And the variance decomposition, I am not going to interpret this, but we can just interpret it in this way. The outcome of the impulse response functions shows that the responses of CPI and GDP due to one standard deviation positive shocks to energy price persist for around 40 quarters, while it takes around 15 to 20 quarters for the exchange rate and interest rate to stabilize after the energy price shocks. The result of variance decomposition shows that there are significant variations among the macroeconomic variables that can be explained by each of the energy price shocks. The macroeconomic indicators are extremely susceptible to minor fluctuation in energy prices, and it has a significant impact on Bangladesh socio-economic situation. The findings supports change in public policies in such a way to reduce their dependency on fossil fuel energy and encourage them toward renewable and clean energy sources for better environmental results and sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your nice presentation. Just one point. Last your conclusion is not evidence from your findings. You should not conclude in that way. I think renewable energy is not an issue of your findings. Whether you are talking about the crude price oil fluctuations and its impact on Bangladesh macroeconomy. Anyway, I will give my some comments at the end. Now I will invite the second paper, which will be presented by Dr. Andy Shahadab Hussain. I think he will present the paper, the title of this paper, Remittances and Housing Dependence, Evidence from Bangladesh.
Okay, I want to make sure you can all see my slide.
I think we can see your slide.
Okay. Can you all hear me properly?
Yes, you can proceed, please.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so so this paper is about remittance dependence, and I don't need to motivate about why remittance is important for Bangladesh. So let me just start with this. Remittance could have two opposing effects to the receiving households. The first effect is income effect. The second one is liquidity effect. So the income effect is that since remittance is a non-labor income to this recipient households, this could reduce their incentive to work. And existing empirical study shows that remittance, let's say 10% increase in remittance leads to about 1 to 4% reduction in work hours. On the flip side, the liquidity effect is that remittances helps household to relax the budget constraint. As a result, they can invest more on health, they can accumulate more capital and diversify their income. Which of these two effects dominate? That's not clear. So as a result, if income effect is dominant, that will lead to remittance dependence. But if the liquidity effect is dominant, that will increase households' income. So in this study, we'll be looking at how remittance, or what is the actual net effect of remittance to these households. And the second thing is existing studies look at this labor supply reduction because of remittance and considers that as remittance dependence, but which ignores several important facts. The first fact is that if remittance leads to more investment in health, then even if households work fewer hours, they could still produce more because they will be healthy. So the effective labor hour could be more, even if they are working fewer hours. At the same time, remittance could help these households to generate non-labor income. Let's say if they could buy land with their remittance money, they can go for sharecropping, or rental income. So ignoring those sources of incomes could lead to misleading conclusion. Okay, so the point I want to highlight is that the causal effect of remittances on households' dependence is not well understood. So the question we're addressing in this study is that does remittance receipt make households dependent on remittances? And the way we'll be addressing this question is at the extensive margin, we'll be looking at does remittance reduce households' likelihood of earning non-remittance income? Or at the intensive margin, we will be looking at does remittance reduce the amount of non-remittance income of the recipient households? The data we'll be using is Bangladesh survey on the use of remittances 2013. It's a national representatives cross-sectional survey conducted by Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics in 2013. This is a universe of all remittance receiving households or migrant households. So all the households in this survey had at least one international migrant. And along with standard questions, one of the key questions for the reason we are using this survey is that it asked about remittance dependence, whether the household have any other income apart from remittances, which gives us the direct indicator of whether the household is dependent on remittance or not. And we also use some other data set. And one other important factor about this data set, our final data set would be using about 9,000 households with temporary male migrants, those who migrated at least 18 months before. And why we are doing that? Because we want to see a 12 months remittance amount received by the households, and in past 12 months, the use of remittances. So the regression we'll be doing is a two-stage least square estimation, like instrumental variable regression, where the outcome variable is remittances, and the outcome variable is households' likelihood of having households having a non-remittance income, or at the intensive margin, whether the actual natural log of actual non-remittance income of the household. And the instrument we'll be using is at the destination level, the change in economic fitness between 2011 and 2012. So why economic fitness could be, or change in economic fitness could be a good instrument in our case for remittances, is that existing study shows that economic fitness is an indicator developed by the World Bank, which shows how an economy can produce complex goods. And the more an economy is able to produce complex goods, the higher demand is going to be for skilled labor. And since most of the Bangladeshi migrants are low skilled labor, as a result, if an economy is becoming or moving towards producing more complex goods, their demand for less skilled Bangladeshi migrants will go down. As a result, their wages also go down. Eventually, the remittance these migrants send to Bangladesh will also go down. And we also show that in the paper. We show that the change in economic fitness is negatively correlated with the change in contribution from the informal sector to the GDP. So, and the validity of this instrument depends on there has to be only one channel through which this change in economic fitness affects the Bangladeshi households. That has to be through remittance. So one other potential channel, if that is significant, that will invalidate our IB, that is international trade channel. And luckily in our case, major Bangladeshi migrant destinations are not our major trade partners. Let's say top 5 migration destinations account for about 76% of Bangladeshi migrants, but they only account for 1% of imports in Bangladesh and 5% of Bangladesh exports. In another channel, that could be migrants selecting into destinations. If migrants...
5 minutes left. Is it better to go to results and other things?
Okay. So we show like several ways that this instrument works. And so the key results we have here is that the bottom one shows that the dummy outcome, where we see the existence of non-remittance income, and which shows that a 10% increase in remittances leads to about 1.5 percentage point higher likelihood of having a non-remittance income. Similarly, the top figure shows that a 10% increase in remittances leads to about 2.6% higher non-remittance income. As a result, the key conclusion we can make from this figure is that the remittances actually do...
I just want to intervene you just a moment. I need to understand your IB, particularly economic fitness variable. There are many other IBs used in the remittance literature, maybe peer effect or other things, but I haven't heard about the economic fitness. Can you please explain a bit more about the variable construction?
Yeah, that's what I was actually doing before. Let me do that and come back to this. So the economic fitness shows that it shows that how easily an economy can move to producing complex goods, how easy for them to diversify their products or produce high-end outputs. So this is an index created by the World Bank. So they incorporate like many of these sort of indicators to create that index. So and we are using year-to-year change, like from 2011 to 2012, the year change in economic fitness for the destination countries where the Bangladeshi migrants went to. Okay, and there is a existing study shows that like this economic fitness is positively correlated with industrial sector labor or more skilled labor. Okay. So yeah, and we also show that like this economic fitness, if Bangladeshi migrants could choose to high-paying destinations, economic fitness change is not really correlated with the high-paying migration destinations. Like this is more of random across countries. Okay, so then I showed that already that remittances leads to higher non-remittance income, but where those non-remittance income comes from. Before I move there, we also show that the level of remittances, if a household receiving relatively higher remittances, this effect is stronger. The higher the household is in the remittance distribution, the effect size becomes stronger. Now then we move to like the sources of this positive effect of remittances on household non-remittance income. We see the rental income, which incorporates property income plus sharecropping. We see the significant effect is positive effect on having non-rental income. But we see negative effect here. We have like 95% confidence interval. But if we look at 90% confidence interval, this negative effect is significant. So it shows that these houses are less likely to have salary and wage income, but they're more likely to have rental income. And other sources are not significant. If we look at the intensive margin, we see about, again, similar result that salary and wages are negative, but rental income is significantly positive. And non-agricultural enterprise is positive, but marginally not significant. Then we move to these mechanisms that I started with, this liquidity effect. Is remittance help households to have like will access households budget constraint? And we see remittances leads to house having above district level consumption, significantly higher. Remittance also helps households to accumulate physical capital. It also helps households to accumulate financial capital. Then we move to like looking at health productivity effect. And we see these remittance receiving households are actually significantly more likely to have a better living standard or healthy lifestyle. In almost apart from water facility, we see remittances, they're all most likely to have better lighting condition, better cooking facility, better sanitation, and they also spend more on health. So overall, the contribution of this paper is that existing study shows that remittances reduces labor supply. We also find that, but overall, remittance actually increases household income, and that income comes from mostly from rental income, which is using their property or going for sharecropping. Okay, so that's all pretty much from myself. I hope to answer questions.
Thank you so much for timely completion of your presentation. It was a very interesting paper. I hope you will get some good comments from audience and our designated discussion. Now we will move to our third paper, which will be presented by Mr. Osama Jamal, PhD student, University of Manchester. He will present his paper, Tackling Tax Avoidance, Evidence from Earning Stripping Rules.
Thank you for the organizers to organize this wonderful conference. I hope you can see the screen and hear me properly. Is it the case? Do I have a green signal? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you.
So today, as the organizer mentioned it, I'll be presenting the paper, Tackling Corporate Tax Avoidance, Evidence from Earning Stripping Rules. So it's not a hidden thing that corporate tax revenues are an essential source of income used to finance public spending. These revenues on average constitute about 10% of the total tax revenues, or approximately 3% of the GDP of OECD countries on average. However, MNEs engage in different tax avoidance practices to minimize their corporate tax liability, with recent research pointing out that MNEs have invested $12 trillion globally into empty corporate shells that don't have any real assets in them and are only vehicles for financial engineering. This is a direct consequence of it is that tax avoidance by MNEs leads to significant shortfall of much needed CIT revenues, with the world on average losing about $200 billion annually. However, the effect is quite disproportionate in such that Africa alone loses approximately $50 billion annually, or approximately $1 trillion over the last 50 years. In order to limit this sort of tax avoidance, OECD in 2015, in their Directive for Base Erosion and Profit Shifting, recommended certain policies. Subsequently, like post-2015, 48 countries globally have introduced these rules. However, what has been missing in the literature until now is that what impact do these rules have on corporate behavior? Therefore, this is the first study that essentially estimates the effect of these anti-tax avoidance policies on profit shifting and tax avoidance at affiliate level, at intragroup reallocation level, at the group level, also estimates the investment responses and survival analysis, and also the extensive marginal locational responses to the policies as well. Obviously, I wouldn't be able to go over everything in detail, therefore, I'll just try to give a very brief or a teaser of whatever the results I get throughout the presentation. In terms of the context of the policy itself, throughout the world, the corporate tax code is devised in a way that interest income is taxable. However, the interest expense is tax deductible. So it reduces down your corporate tax liability. This tax deductibility of interest expenses serves as an incentive for MNEs to shift profits out of high tax jurisdictions by either placing the overall third-party debt more heavily in the high tax entities, or most commonly what they do is they finance capital at high tax affiliates through debt issued by low tax affiliates. So the interest income gets taxed at a very low interest rate, however, the tax expense gets deducted at high tax rates. So OECD in 2015 advised jurisdictions to introduce earnings strippings rules, which essentially set up a threshold, which is a policy parameter, and says that interest deduction is disallowed if the company's interest expense exceeds 30% of its gross profits. Above it, you need to pay taxes on the interest expenses. Below it, it's fine. So to date, starting from 2015 to 2023, 48 jurisdictions worldwide have implemented these rules, and this is the policy that we'll be looking at the effects of in this paper today. In terms of the data, I use financial information provided by Orbis, which is handled by Moody's, which is a global repository of affiliate and group level detailed balance sheet and financial statements. However, I use the information only from 2010 to 2022, relevant for my own paper. The incorporation and the ownership information provided by Orbis allows us to investigate intra-group reallocation and even the extensive margin responses as well. In terms of policy information, I extracted directly from the official country-specific fiscal acts. If it's not available in English, then I lead to OECD reports. And for non-OECD countries, I use financial reports by the Big Four auditing firms. In terms of summary statistics, the panel contains more than 800,000 observations, which pertain to approximately 300,000 global affiliates belonging to 36,500 groups. Number of effective affiliates is 6,000, belonging to 3,000 groups, pertaining to 121 countries globally. Moving on, I'll just present some stylized fact, essentially only one stylized fact about the policy itself. We find that at the threshold, when the OECD recommended 30% of gross profits, we find that post-reform, there's significant bunching at the exemption threshold. And if we zoom in, then we find a considerable share of more firms reporting interest expense to EBITDA just below this threshold. However, we find that this bunching is not only local, but in fact, the distortions are throughout the income distribution. Therefore, we are unable to use regression discontinuity design to estimate the effects of the policy because the running variable is manipulated. Instead, what we do is we naturally lean towards a difference in different strategy. Our baseline specification is on your screens now. YIT is any outcome of interest for firm I in GAT. Treat I is an indicator for firm failing country-specific rules because there's some heterogeneity, there's different timings of the policies itself. And we have an indicator for leads and lags over here as well to estimate the dynamic response rather than just the average response. We allow separate time trends for treated and controlled firms. We also introduce country times year fixed effects so that the beta parameters estimated are essentially average treatment effects rather than average treatment effect on the treated. The standard errors are clustered at firm level and staggered DID is used to avoid concurrent confounding factors, which shape the global dynamics. Moving on to the results, I'll just present a wide spectrum of results that I investigate the effect of the policies on. So first of all, directly at the affiliate level, I find that subsequent to the implementation of the policy, the profit shifting by the firms that aggressively tax plan, it reduced by approximately on average by 15% post-reform right after the year. However, it was a continuous decline ever since. So by 2 years, the policy was implemented, the profit shifting actually decreases by close to 35%. If profit shifting goes down, then a necessary consequence should be that the tax paid should increase. So we find that the tax base increases by a similar margin, so approximately by 35%. So whatever, it was a direct one-on-one estimate of the effect of the policy. However, if your profit shifting is limited, then you don't need to use debt anymore. So there are some investment frictions because of which investments should decrease. And I find that investments as a percentage of total assets decreases by approximately, let's say, 1% post-reform. However, since investments were already 0.3 cent per dollar of total assets, so this response is essentially 3.7% in terms of percentages at the affiliate level. For intra-group effects, there should be some sort of reallocation. While we find that this is the equity at the affected firms. At the affected firms, debt financing goes down and equity financing increases. However, this equity finance increase is at the expense of equity financing decreasing at the non-affected affiliates. So it's important to mention that the control group across the two graphs is the same. It's just that on the left-hand side, we had affected affiliates, and on the right-hand side, we have sisters of affected affiliates, all right? So if I have another affiliate which is located anywhere throughout the globe, I drop them from control group because if there is reallocation, then control group is not pure, it's also reacting. Therefore, we do find some evidence of reallocation as well. A direct consequence of decrease in equity at the unaffected affiliates is also a reduction in investments. And we find that the response is quite similar over here in terms of if you want to quantify it, it's approximately a reduction of 4%. So this is the affiliate level effect. What is happening at the aggregate group level? At the group level, we find that profit shifting reduces even at the entire group level, which significantly highlights the robustness of the policy itself. Profit shifting decreases, therefore tax base should increase and the taxes paid should increase. So yeah, that's something we find as well. However, a quite striking response we find is that the investments at the group level remain unchanged. Now, this is quite essential result wherein at the unconsolidated level or the affiliate level, we found out that across the two sets of affiliates, investments were decreasing. So a direct additional impact should be the investments should be decreasing at the group level effect as well. However, we don't find it to be the case. So this sort of result pushed us towards investigating.
You have only 1 minute left. Please wrap up the findings.
Yeah, there's one final response, and that's the extensive margin effect. Well, we find that the probability of incorporation post-reform for a group increases in jurisdictions that don't have these rules and decreases in jurisdictions that have these rules. So in other words, if I am a multinational enterprise and I need to set up an affiliate, I am now more likely to set up in a country which does not have these rules. So this effect also is a policy recommendation for other countries as well, that if you want to protect your tax base and want to increase your tax revenues, then they may consider implementing these rules as well. I think I'll just skip the conclusion in the interest of the time, and that's where I end. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Osama Jama, for your nice presentation. Now we'll move to our last paper of this session. This will be presented by Mr. Arif Munir. His paper is about economic growth and crime. Is there any inverted U-shaped relation in Bangladesh?
Assalamu alaikum. Hello everyone. Good morning. I'm Afif Ibn Munir, a student of Department of Economics, Jahangirnagar University. So today I will be sharing our paper in which my co-author is Anita Ajadria, also a student of Department of Economics, Jahangirnagar University. The title of our paper is Economic Growth and Crime. Is there an inverted U-shaped relation in Bangladesh? Now, at first glance, you may wonder the color gradient, green and red represents our national flag, which is quite true. But if you think a bit deeper, economic growth, we often term it in terms of dollar value. And if you have noticed the dollar bills, they are actually green. At the same time, probably one of the most heinous crime will be murder. And whenever murder occurs, the blood, external, internal bleeding comes, and that is in terms of red. So before someone thinks that it is an art show rather than an economic discussion, we move on to the economic aspect of our research. Now, before that, we look this data, this table, which shows the per capita GDP and total crime in this 30-year span between 1993 to 2022. What we can clearly see over these 30 years, our per capita GDP tripled and our total crime reported also tripled. So at first glance, it seems like as our economy is growing,
what type of crimes these are?
There are
the source of getting this number.
We will mention it in a moment. So total crime actually comprises of 19 crimes, and we gathered this information from Bangladesh Police with help of our teacher Istiak Raihan. So 19 crimes in a nutshell, if we sum them up, that will give us the total crime per year. So what we can clearly see here that as the economy is growing, total crime is also increasing over the time. But there comes our focus on this research, whether there is actually a non-linear relationship in this trend. So whether it will eventually decline as our economy grow more and more. And to do that, we have used the idea of Kuznets curve, which you might be familiar with. We are taught this in our development economics course, which was coined by Simon Kuznets. The basic idea is as the economy continue to grow, inequality initially increase and eventually goes down. So if you just simply replace the inequality with crime, that gives us the crime Kuznets curve, where as the economy will grow, crime will increase and eventually go down. If we show it in graphical term, we can see it here. We have referred the economic growth in terms of income per capita, and for Kuznets curve, we have inequality, and for crime Kuznets curve, we have crime. Now, in terms of the available literatures, there are not that many, but one of the prominent ones would be Bono and others, which they conducted in 2018 based on United States of America. And this actually validates the CKC or crime Kuznets curve. And it also focused, like we focused, the nonlinear relationship between crime and economic growth. What they found in the long run, the crimes which are tied with economic appropriation, for example, robbery, they are more reliable. We can clearly understand since we are talking about economic growth and crime. So those crimes which are related to financial incentives, they are more reliable, whereas those crimes which are not that much relevant to economic incentives, they are less reliable. But we don't have that much time to discuss all the research now. In terms of economic growth and crime, if we do any research, there are two ways you can do it. Either you can take crime as the dependent variable, or you can take economic growth as the dependent variable. So in our research, we took economic growth as the explanatory variable and crime as the dependent variable. So in the first two research by Andretta and Paul in Mexico and South Africa respectively, they took it the other way around. So they focused on crime, effect of economic growth based on crime. So crime was the explanatory variable and economic growth is the dependent variable. And they found a negative relationship as expected. As crime will grow, as crime will increase, economic growth will be negatively affected. But the way we did it, as did by Adekoya and Deteto in their research on Nigeria and Italy, they did it the way we did. So crime affects economic growth negatively. And in terms of Bangladesh, is there actually a research gap? Yes, there is, because we did not find any proper research on crime Kuznets curve. The only research that we came up with, which kind of relates with our findings, is done by you and others in 2022, where their findings is lower rates of crime, unemployment, and corruption all favor economic growth. So they did it the other way around. Now, variables and data, we took, like I have mentioned already, total crime as the dependent variable, and real GDP per capita, trade openness, and urbanization as the explanatory variables. And the time frame, you can see that 30-year span. We have already mentioned the data source before, so we move on due to the lack of time. Our estimation method comprises of three things: auto-regressive distributive lag, ARDL bound test, which is advantageous compared to the other tests that are available, Dickey Fuller unit truth test in order to check the stationarity, and ARDL error correction model to estimate long and short-term elasticities. We also use diagnostics tests, which are like keys to unlock respective aspects of any econometric model. So Bruce-Pagan-Godfrey test for heteroscedasticity, Jagd-Berer test for normality, Ramsey-Riset test for stability, Lagrange multiplier test for serial correlation, cumulative sum of recursive residuals for structural stability. Now let's get into the main part, results and discussion. As for the unit truth test, we see here the only variable that is stationary in the level form is urbanization. So we can denote it as I0, and the other three variables are non-stationary in the level form. So there is unit root, and they are stationary at the first difference form. So I1. So since there is an admixture, so we cannot use other tests, and we are going to use ARDL test, bound test. So in terms of ARDL bound test, we have used from the Schwartz criteria of top 20 models 21110, and here we can see the F value is above 8, and the upper bound at 1% significance level is 5, which gives us this conclusion that variables are indeed co-integrated, which implies long-run equilibrium relationship among them, among these variables. So now we'll mainly focus on the long-run result, because that is our main focus at the right side table. And we can clearly see that all the coefficients are significant, and from the sign of the GDP and per capita GDP and per capita GDP square, we see that in the short run for the per capita GDP it is positive, and the square of per capita GDP it is negative. That actually validates our result, that is there is a non-linear relationship there present here. As for the trade openness and urbanization, we see a negative sign, which indicates as our economy will open to more and more trade, there will be more and more opportunity, more and more employment that will eventually lead to less and less crime, which are tied with economic aspects or economic incentives. Similar to that, urbanization, as people will migrate more to the urban areas, and or our urban areas will expand, there will be less crime. We can expect that from better judicial system and implication of rule of law. So we can say that crime Kuznets curve is indeed valid in the long run in Bangladesh. So as for the diagnostics test, I will go over them quickly. A normality test, we can see from the probability that we cannot reject the null hypothesis that there is a normal distribution. So there is
I think you may conclude.
Okay, thank you. So we have found all the diagnostic tests indicating that there is no major issues in our results, and we have found similar discoveries for crime Kuznets curve. We have already discussed this bonus research, and negative relationship of trade openness is also found in the answer and others, and negative relationship in urbanization has been found in Ghani, Jain, and others. So in a nutshell, we can conclude that there is an inverted U-shaped relationship between economic growth and Bangladesh, economic growth and crime in Bangladesh. I would like to end with a poetry. In Bangladesh's story, where progress is spun, economic heights, yet battle not won. Crime's descent, let it gracefully fade, harmony sought in the growth cascade. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for an interesting paper. I hope you will get a lot of questions and you will get some comments also. Now I invite our designated discussion, Dr. D. Islam, to discuss all the papers. You have 15 minutes.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Dr. Monjul Hussain. I would like to congratulate all the presenters. All these papers are very interesting, and I find them very robust in terms of their analysis. So there are a lot of things I like about these papers.
I'm not going to discuss what I like about these papers because time is limited. But I'm going to talk about that what are the things that can be improved, what the things that should be addressed to improve the quality of the paper. So let me start with the first paper presented by Mr. Supin. Uh, so one thing you talked about the extra identification restriction you need. So in structural, so you estimated the reduced from work and you converted your structural work to reduce form, and then so in your reduce form work, if you compare the structural value to reduce form work, there should be like n square minus n over 2 extra parameter in the structural work that cannot be identified to reduce form work. This is what I know, but the equation you showed is something different. I don't know where this is coming from, so please check about that. And I was not sure about the motivation of the paper. Is it about the energy price or the mix of energy? So if it is about energy price, then we should look at the aggregate energy price and how this affects the GDP and inflation and other macroeconomic variables. And another point I think very important, and it's not very conventional in structural work, the way you identify the parameters. So you have the extra you need to impose some restrictions, and the way you did is in recursive form. So generally there are like a very classical paper in structural work, like I don't know, we have look at it like Cristiano Eisenbaum and Evans 2006 JP paper. So their argument was that the macroeconomic variable like GDP or other inflation or other variable generally affected by policy variable with a lag. But policy variable actually responds to macroeconomic conditions contemporaneously. So GDP or consumption or investment or those variable actually ordered first as the most exogenous, and policy variable ordered as last as least exogenous. So in your paper, in your study, is different, and I don't know why you did that. What is the logic of ordering of your recursive nature? So if you look at those paper, I think that would be useful to rationalize why you were doing this type of recursive formulation. So and also in Tourist decomposition is a little bit different from what literature actually defines. So I'd also like to request you to look at the how other paper actually done the tourist decomposition in their estimation. And I also find your IRF, even though there was not enough time to show the IRF, but those are very, I would say, not very common. I mean, you cannot see cyclicality in impulse response function. So impulse response functions look like is some kind of cyclicality or seasonality. I don't know, is it a problem of your data or identification? But your RF looks very different than what it should be. So if you have just one-time shock, then you have the steady state, and the variable should change from the steady state, and then over time it should come back to steady state. But that's not the case in your paper. There are some other observation, minor observation, which I guess I can share after this session. Another interesting paper by the Dr. Shahad. I also find this very interesting paper. But there are some things I think you define intensive margin and extensive margin. I was expecting that
the way you define intensive margin is like whether is like 0 1 dummy variable, and the extensive margin is the amount. But it's the same thing. I was expecting that intensive margin is the amount of remittance, and extensive margin could be most appropriate the frequency or the number of times in a given period the household receives remittances. That would make more sense as an extensive margin, not just the probability. So I think, in my opinion, you are doing the same thing, but calling it in different name, intensive margin, extensive margin. And it's also important whether you receive one payment with a large amount and whether you receive frequent smaller payment. So that would affect whether you invest on other income generating sources or you just consume and you smooth out the consumption. I have another issue. I have another observation about your IV. So I guess the IV you are choosing is even worse than what is making the problem more worse, in my opinion, because the reason you choose the IV in your paper, if I'm not wrong, is reverse causality. But I think the IV you are choosing might not be solving that reverse causality. Even it might, since you are using the destination countries complexity index or changing the complexity. So, there's some in Bangladesh people who are going abroad. If in a given village, people tend to go in the same destination country. So, if you use this as your IV, then you are actually inputting a special correlation in your regression. So this is another added layer of your problem. It would be another additional problem in the regression. And also, what about you talked about the selection, but what about the sorting? And what about the learning? People can learn if someone goes to a complex economic system. They can learn. They can learn faster way. They can learn many other ways how to generate income. That can be transmitted to household living in Bangladesh. And then the learning. So you are identifying causally the impact of remittance on whether the dependence of remittance, but there's an important channel of learning. I don't see that you are capturing that learning. You are just attributing this channel to the amount of remittance. And in irrigation, I think whether a household will invest on consumption or income generating sources, whether they will do the own, they will involve in the income generating activities like becoming an entrepreneur or just buying or investing in some other business or simply investing on health and education. That critically depends on the composition of households. Uh, Whether the family is young, the left behind family is young, or whether they are educated, how many male are there. So these are lot of household and member characteristics that are critically correlated with the decision and the ability of left behind families of investing and generating non-limited income and their dependence on limited income. But nonetheless, this paper seems very interesting, and I wish you all the best. Then another very interesting paper by Mr. Usama Jamal. I will be honest, this paper is too long. I didn't have enough time to go through the paper, but it's very interesting paper and very relevant issues. But I find one thing is I can connect your model with the empirical framework or estimation. So I don't understand what is the relevance of a model. A model has some results, but I didn't find whether you verify your model's result empirically uh, uh, and you want model stages things to be very straightforward. You don't need to go through like a lot of these complicated econometric methodology. You can do some simple descriptive statistics to verify whether the model's prediction is true or not. And also you have a model, but I think any model in this case should be dynamic in nature because corporations are always forecasting the behavior of the policymakers, and their actions should be based on their future expectation about the policymakers. And also, investment on capital is lumpy investment. Investment in one period will affect many other periods. So the model you have is not dynamic. So I think it would be very useful if you can make the model more dynamic, and if you can incorporate the expectation of corporations, because they have like sophisticated research department, and they always do this to minimize their tax incidence and to maximize their income. I find your empirical analysis very robust. But I'm just worried about whether the treatment, which is the interest is tracking the policy, whether the treatment is exogenous. Like any traditional different framework, is staggered DID also subject to the treatment exogenity. So the main question is that whether the income tax policy like interest policy is independent of, and I guess if not, policymaker, right, they will be very strict or they're making any changes, should depends on macroeconomic conditions. And if this is the case, then the treatment is not exogenous. And then the result will not hold if you can't argue that the treatment is exogenous. And also, you talked about one policy, but the tax policy is like very complicated political economy ecosystem, and there's a lot of like bargaining, and there's like policy. If a government changes one policy, then corporation actually lobby and make changes in other sides. So if your interest is typing policy, is it uncorrelated with other tax policies in a given country in a specific time? If not, then it would be uh, uh, difficult to attribute the findings to that policy change. You are actually discussing this point that there is a mismatch between farm level evidence and the group level evidence. I also find it very interesting, and if you can, I guess you discussed it in paper, but I didn't have time to go through. But if you can explain it, why there is a mismatch between individual corporation level and the group level findings, that would be, I guess, very important for us to learn. Then the last presenter, the young presenters, I appreciate their effort of choosing a good research topic. But let me be professional of criticizing or commenting on the paper. So, in Bangladesh, crime data, how reliable it is. I mean, let's be honest, people to what extent trust the police or the justice system? And so the data, and since you are taking long time sheet data, so currently because of technological advancement, a lot of financial crimes or other crimes are reported or detected compared to previous time. So the change you are seeing is because of technological changes, might be because of technological changes. So you have no control for this in your regression. And you talked about the choice of dependent variable, whether it should be economic growth or it should be crime rate. I think that should depends on what type of crime you're modeling. If it is financial crime, it's most likely financial crime. I mean, there's always a problem of reverse causality. There's no way you can remove the reverse causality in this case. That's why even if you are using ARDL model, because you have different order of integration among the variable, but the issue that the way you are interpreting is more like causal, but the problem of reverse causality will always be there. But so it would be better if you can use some other strategy like using some instrumental variable approach, and also like to control the reverse causality, you can use the dynamic OLS and different type of other sophisticated model. And also there is another important, in addition to reverse causality, omitted variable is another challenge. You don't have inequality in your regression model. So the non-financial crime or financial crime, it also depends on inequality. If suppose you have high growth, but growth is accumulated only among few individuals, then there will be more crime. Those other omitted variables can also pollute the region. So these are my brief comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Din Islam, for your nice comments. I hope the authors of the papers will be benefited from your comments. Now I would like to open the floor and we'll take some questions from the floor if you have any. You raise your hand and give your introduction. If you give introduction, then I'll ask the question. Don't have any question? Try to ask whatever you want.
Thank you. So my name is Junaid. So I have two questions to the Dr. Shahadat Hussain. So first is like how you actually control the household composition in your model. For example, if I consider a household which has like no, if the main earning person is go to abroad and send remittance, and there is no one in the household remain above 18 years old who can actually operate some other non-remittance earning. So how you actually control this? And here the land holding of the household is a major issue. Since I have seen in your result that the rental income has a very significant impact. And I have also a question on the agriculture interface. So I just want to know what is the main reason or transformation mechanism of this negative impact. Thank you.
Okay, then
Should I just answer now or take all the questions first?
now, okay, after taking all the questions.
My question to Afif Ibn is the relationship between economic growth and crime, and which is of crime was that curve sort of U-shape, inverted U-shape, right? So what did you got basically? Inverted U-shape you got, right? So my concern is if it is non-linear in shape, then why are you estimating it in a linear fashion, like a linear ARDL? Why not you are going for the non-linear ARDL, which is developed by Shane at 2014 paper, I think. And if it is so, then you should also go for some non-linear unit root testing or non-linearity in the variables such as right. So this was my concern. Thank you.
One more question. If nobody is asking any question, I have a few questions or comments to all the papers, and I think it is better before I leave it to the authors to respond. First of all, the first paper, it is an interesting paper, definitely 16, 17. Also, it was mentioned in the paper. So the problem is that energy price is administered in Bangladesh. So it is not regularly updating or adjusting with international prices. So this is a big problem if you use the real data and see apply any model, whatever it is partial equilibrium or it is a general equilibrium model. You see that in Bangladesh, once it is upward adjusted, it never goes down. And that is what happened in the last 10 years maybe, when international prices go down, but went down in Bangladesh, it was not. In last 4 or 5 years, the PPC, Bangladesh Petroleum Corporation, made a huge profit. They said that they are compensating the previous losses. So if it is so, then if you consider international prices and then you see how it is affecting Bangladesh prices, then it will be a bit misleading, and also you need to consider the lag periods, or how much time it takes to translate into the local prices. So that is my one comment. Second comment is the findings are almost the same as it was in the previous papers. That is, it has a negative impact on GDP growth, also inflation, definitely. For example, our paper was economy-wide model we used, but it is a partial equilibrium. We just follow some price variables like inflation, exchange rate, and other things. So some, I think, pass-through effect may be interesting if you want to make it more interesting, and also you can see to identify the lag periods or any other things that would be good exercise for this analysis. In general, I think the results are consistent with other previous papers. The remittance paper, I think it is interesting, but the problem is the data was for 2013 BBS study, and as you showed that the findings are so far, I think very plausible and expected results. The reason is that the 2013 BBS survey also showed that 40% remittance goes to investment. The rest, similar type of 30-40% goes to consumption. So once you are trying to see some spillover effect on non-remittance income and other things, already there are some evidences from there. But the problem is, I think still I have a confusion about your IB. The one you use economic fitness, I think whatever it is the index. So you may try one or two alternative IP if it is possible. Usually there are some, as our discussor also said, that what they are learning from other, maybe peer effect or consumption, or even in one of our paper we try to use some bank branches in different remittance areas, because in many remittance there is a concentration of remittances in Bangladesh in many pockets. So you see that banks and other financial institutions go to those areas even just to accommodate the remittances. This kind of many other factors you may consider. Though you showed some validity of the instrument, but still I feel that if you say it is economic, it covers everything. There should have some collinearity and also some identifiers also. The third one, this is very interesting to me. If interest expense exceeds 30% of gross profit, then you said that they should be brought under tax net. And if you could use, I'm not very sure, I didn't go through your paper. I think if you could use some corporate level and enterprise level data, I'm not sure. And the reason is that tax avoidance is a very complex issue. How can you assess the tax avoidance? Whether if they do not pay the full taxes, still they are paying taxes. So how much they are paying and how much they should be paid, I think it is very complex issue, and I am not sure how it can be assessed. But if you have data from the National Revenue departments and others, and you can identify that this earning stripping rules can be applied in other countries too, I think it would be an interesting policy variable for you. is possible for you to contest with some descriptive analysis you can do or add to your paper. Thank you so much. And finally, the last paper, I think, Afif Monet, I appreciate your work on this part, but you have to also consider some things. For example, your specification seems to me a bit weird in the sense that you are taking corruption variable as a dependent variable, outcome variable, and then growth and others. You already cited that there are some papers, but I am not very sure what is the quality of those papers. The reason is that if you consider growth variable in the right side and then also trade openness and other, there should have some collinearity problem in other things apart from endogeneity. And it is very difficult if urbanization, you are saying that if urbanization increases, corruption reduces. This is not true. Urbanization always increases, allows some more corruption. But what type of corruptions are good for growth and what types of corruption are bad for growth? How can you identify? Corruption doesn't always, may not be always bad, may not be always good. So it's, but still it is an aggregate data you used. I think exercise is good, but still you need to, if you can disaggregate types of corruption, I think it's very difficult. If you just come out with some figure that this is the number of corruption, it can be road accidents. Is it true that road accidents have negative impact on growth? Maybe or may not be. I don't know. So it's a kind of black box when you say that corruption or crime, whatever it is. Corruption may be okay. Crime is a difficult issue to convince. So if you, I think, without going into your econometric analysis, but if you can at least identify the types of crimes and then you do some disaggregate analysis, or you can see how it is affecting growth or other factors. For example, human capital, you said unemployment, but you can use unemployment data also, rather than just human capital. These just some suggestions. And now I leave it to the authors to respond to their comments from this discussion myself on the floor. So first of all, Mr. Putin.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I just start some answer from the discussion, sir. Sir's first comment on the identification problem. I used here the short-term restrictions. So A matrix triangular and B diagonal matrix. So have we successfully able to identify the parameters, but I think I will discuss with you further into. And another comment on the motivation of energy price or energy price. Actually, sir, here we try to identify individual impact of each of the energy price. Actually, we try to identify the effects of energy price separately, but so we can also can construct an energy price index, and then we can also our macro variables. Another question was the order of the logic of the ordering of our macro variables. We reviewed several papers. We found that GDP is the most indigenous variables. One of the papers. So that's why you use GDP in the last order and exogenous shocks in the economy. But in this case, this is the preliminary findings of our research, so we will incorporate your comments here. Some comments was the loop IRF and Cholesky decompositions. So one of the literature I found that the response of GDP is like that way. It increases in one quarter and then decreases. And in this way, converges. We actually need to rethink or how this way responses the GDP variable. Thank you. Sir's comment was how we can use the lag period. So in the structural hard setting, we used the lags, 4 lags. We found that the energy price variables are significant up to 4 lags, and we used the 4 lags in the model, but we didn't mention in the PPT. That's on. And so yes, we use the partial equilibrium model, but we are also thinking that we can use the dynamic stochastic general equilibrium model for the better estimate model. Thank you.
And Mr. Shahadat, if you have some
Yeah,
responses.
sure. So let me quickly respond to some of the questions I received. First thing is like both Dr. Din Islam and Junaid highlighted household characteristics, because who are staying in the household, like the brother or the father, could determine, or the wife in the household could affect like what sort of economic activities household actually get involved in, like whether they can invest the money or not. We checked that sort of like heterogeneous effect based on who receives the remittance, is the father, mother versus brother, sister, or wife. We don't see any significant difference in terms of utilization of money or remittances. So that's why we, even if we did the analysis, we did not add that in the paper, but maybe we should add, even if we don't have any significant difference in terms of utilization. The other question is from Junaid, is that why do we see negative effect on agricultural enterprise earnings? It could be due to, we don't have any way to directly test that, but my hypothesis is it's because of either households are reducing labor supply, that like hours of work in maybe in agriculture, or it could be they hire someone and those hired workers are not as attentively work in the field as the owner would work. In agriculture economics, there are evidence that these hired workers are less productive than the actual owner of the lands. That could be something that going on there. And Dr. Din Islam Bhai, like a couple of points you highlighted, like those are really good points, like the frequency of remittances. Actually, we should see some like interaction of remittances with frequency of remittances. Probably that would be an interesting thing to see. Also, learning at the destination, that's something I should check. Like at this moment, I don't know how to do that, but I think it would be interesting to see like is learning is a channel. But what we did so far is like we did a imperfect IV estimation, which is a way that even if IV is not perfect, but is there, at least we can learn something from IV. So imperfect IV, what it does, it gives the interval estimation rather than the point estimation. And we see the interval estimation makes sense. So even if the IV is not exactly perfect, but at least IV is doing something to resolve the reverse causality problem. But I agree with you that we should explore more. One thing that we had to explore for an IV that at the destination level, because other IVs we see in remittances, like the bank branches or like number of branches for the institution through which individuals send remittances. So those the IVs are not going to work for us because those will be, let's say bank branches will be highly correlated with the local economic activities. If it is a location where lots of economic activities going on, it's likely that bank branches are going to be there. So we cannot use at least instruments that are originating at the home country. We have to find something outside, like at the destination level. But I appreciate like all the good suggestions. I found something to work on. I'm working on those things. Thank you.
I'm just saying that bank branches not only everywhere is concentrated in subnational level or in the state level or others, but you will see that those are pockets of remittances like Chittagong and others. You will see that bank branches are available in those places just to accommodate the remitters and others. Just it's up to you to see.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Then, do you want to respond, Mohit? Oh, another one is Mr. Osama Jamal. Do you want to respond to any comments or questions?
Both of you for like with the organizers and generally for organizing the conference once again, and you two for bringing out such wonderful points. Starting with Dr. Dean, thanks a lot for pointing out of like incorporating a dynamic model rather than a static model. So like now I have made it a part of my research agenda to like adapt it to dynamic expectations of the firms as well. The other thing that you pointed out was verifying the exogeneity of the treatment from other, like the macroeconomic conditions of the country per se, and the other policies affecting the multinational enterprises. So one thing that I have actually verified is that the basis for introducing the policy was not macroeconomic per se, but was more of political consideration. So like when OECD introduced this directive in 2015, there was an agreement by the European Union which said that every European country should have this policy as a part of their national mandate by 2019, 1st December 2019. So it was, and if they fail to do so, there will be legal proceedings in the International Court of Justice against it. So the 27 of the entire European Union jurisdictions, they implemented it right in 2019, just at the cusp of it. Similarly, in other instances, it was the pressure of OECD or the IMF lending institutions, so like Zambia, Uganda, Kenya, all of these countries, they simply introduced it because it was a condition of IMF per se. So I think that on the macroeconomic condition, it's fine. However, the other thing that you pointed out, wherein I'll bring in the chair as well. So like verifying exogeneity from other concurrent policies is very tricky because the consensus is that there are approximately 17 different channels from which multinational enterprises tend to evade taxes or avoid taxes. And there are a certain group of firms that get affected or that essentially use all of these 17 channels. So like no matter which policy you implement, they'll get affected by it. So I think it involves some sort of qualitative analysis wherein you simply isolate those firms and check the robustness of the results on the remaining pool of firms. But sure, thanks again for both of these wonderful suggestions, and this is something that I will work on as well in the future draft. Okay. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you. Now, Mr. Munir.
Thank you for all the remarks and questions. As for the remarks of honorable discussion, reliability of data is an ever-present issue in Bangladesh, especially when it comes to crime. So we didn't have that much flexibility in that regard. But as for the technological factor and reverse causality, we hope to incorporate them in our future research, especially on this topic. And as for the omitted variables, like the discussion mentioned, since we did the Ramsey reset test, the functional form was correct. Therefore, we kind of assume that it will not be an issue as per our econometric modeling. And now let's come to the question. The question was why we did not use the non-linear ARDL model. The main reason is since we are a student of fourth year, we are not taught the non-linear aspects yet. So we decided to actually grasp the whole idea theoretically first, then actually implement in our research. And as for the remarks from the honorable chair, the crime and urbanization do actually have the negative relationship, at the same time positive relationship in some research. So there were mixed findings. So our findings were at one way, and there were other findings found in Pakistan, I believe. And as for the types of crimes, we did not actually incorporate corruption, but there were 19 crimes, to name a few, like kidnapping, burglary, then murder, oppression against women, and so on. And as for the unemployment data, we would like to incorporate that in our future research. Thank you very much for all the remarks and the question.
Thank you so much. I think we are almost at the end of our session. I think it was a very nice session, and the paper presenters, I congratulate all the presenters for presenting very important papers. I think energy price is a very important issue for Bangladesh, and I always say that they should have a dynamic price adjustment policy. As we are moving toward digitalization and middle income and after that, and high income countries over time, but we are still putting a lot of subsidies on energy prices, and still we could not improve any mechanism to adjust with international prices, right? So this type of things should be I think brought into the policy making, and there should have a dynamic policy making in terms of price adjustment. Otherwise, it will have a negative impact on prices of other commodities and other things. And because it takes time to adjust with the prices, offset the price adjustment, whatever it is, upward or downward. So that's why we are every paper finds it has the impact on inflation. Otherwise, it could it maybe it will have a negative impact. Anyway, uh, remittance is another issue, though it is not fall into the macroeconomic in general. The paper that has been discussed in this session, they are discussed on micro aspects, but it has maybe some macro aspects, and maybe we'll see some paper in the future on macroeconomic aspects of remittances. Tax avoidance, though it is a cross-country analysis, but the issue that has been raised about the tax avoidance, I think we can learn in Bangladesh about how to adopt this kind of policies to identify tax avoidances by the corporate sector. And finally, it's true that corruption and crime, in fact, I'm always saying corruption. Corruption is more related to growth than crime. But crime issue, it might have some social aspect also. So if you can disaggregate the crime nature or types of crime, that would make more sense to your finding. I hope you can continue this type of topic in the future, and definitely we are embarking on a high growth path over time, and time is also increasing. If it is really if it has some impact, economic impact, then it should affect growth and how the channels. You need to identify the channels through which the crime has been affecting growth. That at least should be discussed in the paper, in the literature review and other things. So finally, I would like to thank everybody for your patient hearing, and I hope you enjoyed the session. Thank you all, the organizers and the team of SANEM who are supporting us in this session. Thank you.
Thank you for the commendation, sir. Now I'd like to request our honorable chair to hand over the token of appreciation and certificate to the presenters. And the online participants will get their certificates through email. Thank you.
Okay. Now, this is right. Oh, Mr. Munir.
Now, Silent team would like to provide some token of appreciation to our honorable chair and moderator. Now I'd like to request everyone to have some tea or tea break. The second floor of meeting room 1.